Pretty usually living on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. Big day calls for a special edition video. We finally caught a regulatory bone here. We had a series of fortunate events. Grayscale winning their SEC lawsuit in the appeals court, which was very likely based on the initial court appearance. We have Dixie pulling back today. It's one of the only things on my list that red. I know it's hard to see probably. For most of you on mobile, you crazy kooks who watch videos on mobile, Dixie's red today. EBTC, ETH BTC red today. Everything else on my list green. Regional banks, oil, gold, and obviously Bitcoin as well as Mara up 30%. So let's break this down. What can we expect going forward? What am I watching? And what's going to happen next? So this is GBTC and ETHE in the red. On the bottom there is the discounts. The initial trial was sometime in March, and I think somewhere around this day, the discount recovered quite a bit at that time. Today, it's up to 15%. So you still have a 15% coupon buying GBTC over spot. Now, as most of us well know, spot Bitcoin and GBTC, very, very different. But to the non-crypto crowd, to the non-Bitcoin crowd, this is a viable alternative, as is any of the futures ETFs. Big volume coming in on this today, almost hitting a new high for 2023. So undeniably, the market took this as a very, very good sign for things to come, a very good sign for GBTC. ETHE also closed considerably. One of the silliest takes I continue to see is, oh, good news for Bitcoin? That means alts must be amazing now. That jump to conclusions is interesting, but I get it. You know, we need BTC to do well for any of these other garbage projects to do well. In any event, the ETHE discount continues to close as well, but it's still pretty high considering at 28%. Now, yes, you're paying fees on this, and yes, you're not getting staking rewards on this. So buyer beware. But if I'm just like, putting TA on this thing, it doesn't look half bad, much like the ascending triangle on spot ETH for higher highs. This looks like it wants to go higher. So undeniably, this is amazing news for the industry. I think for Grayscale, they still have a journey to win the war, but they've certainly won the battle. Before I get any further here, let me talk about today's video sponsor, Kraken Pro. Kraken Pro is a complete overhaul of the Kraken trading experience with a one-stop shop for advanced and professional traders. Kraken Pro enables efficient trading execution across multiple markets with a UI that allows for unique optimization tailored to your trading style. You can check out Kraken Pro with the link in the description of this video. And one advantage for anyone watching this video is that you have access and the knowledge and hopefully the wherewithal to go to a spot exchange like Kraken, get KYC'd if that's the avenue you so choose. But now is a great time to do this sort of thing if you're going to get KYC'd anywhere, because there's a significant lull in general activity. You've got customer support people, I'm sure, chomping at the bit to help you, versus in peak bull mania when all the exchanges are trying to scale up and add people and train people, and you're waiting a week to get an email, right? Like, now's the time, okay? Now's the time to get KYC, get everything, get your house in order, get your security in order, get your hardware wallet, whatever you got to do, figure it out now so you're not scrambling later. Bit of a mild volume pickup on the BTC side of things on Kraken. But yes, alts have done well with the news. Congrats to everyone holding non-Bitcoin. As we can see here in the 24-hour moves for some of these coins has been considerable. And one thing I saw on the analytics tab for Kraken Pro that I've never really paid attention to, but it's called the aggressor differential. So basically looking at market buys and market sells. And there was a significant amount of market buying when that news dropped. So this is the kind of thing you want to see if you're bullish anything. We have news, it's positive, the market takes it as positive. And like I already said, we had this tiny window where Legacy's actually up today. The JOLTS numbers came in. That was another thing that showed job market softening a little bit. Less job openings. So markets are definitely happy today all around. Because I didn't talk about it yesterday, I'll talk about it today. James put out his weekly report, and there was a massive decline in flows last week. Now I expect this to flip this week, honestly, on this news. And it just goes to show you, make a plan, trade the plan. You know, don't pay attention to some ancillary data points like this. Yes, flows are extremely important for price in the moment, but at the end of the day, most of us are aware that we will have a spot ETF at some point, whether it's within Gary's term, after Gary's term, Biden's second term, whoever's next term. Like, it doesn't matter. It's coming eventually. It's not like most of us are here for the next 6 months. I think most of us are here for quite some time anyway. So it's not like it's in any rush. If we look at where it's coming out of, most of it came out of Bitcoin and out of Germany and Canada. Those were the two biggest negative flows. We had some negative flows from short Bitcoin as well. And of course, always on this list, but never changing, is Grayscale, because it is a locked product. So yes, everybody was rooting for Barry. Everybody's happy for the industry. The product remains incredibly flawed. It is a roach motel. It is Hotel California. It is a disaster with fees. They're just raking it in. And if we look at the breakdown, these are all of Grayscale's products pulled from their website today. So these numbers are as of yesterday. These are going to change with today's close. But we have Grayscale products, and we have a few other products that you could lump into this group. OBTC being one, which nobody talks about. I'm only personally aware of it because of where I used to work at Valkyrie. Former colleagues highlighting what that was. And the Bitwise 10, which I think many people are familiar with. And for these products, the question is, what is the discount? Okay. And how much of the product contains BTC? As of yesterday, if my calculations are correct, BitW had a 50% discount. Now in BitW, it's kind of a bunch of things, mostly Bitcoin and ETH. It's like 99% Bitcoin and ETH. Fees are incredibly high. Part of that is because these are new products without competition. Part of that is custody fees are extremely high. So to some degree, this makes sense, but at least Osprey, OBTC dropped fees considerably and are somewhat competitive, future-proofing themselves a little bit. But, the Grayscale stuff, like I said months ago, I'm like, okay, if they win, they're going to drop the fees, right? Of course they're not going to drop the fees. I'll eat my hat if they drop the fees. I'll be happy. But they really need those fees because Barry's fighting a battle on many fronts here with Genesis and Gemini and all the other lawsuits that are going on. This is the average fee, by the way, for an ETF in 2022, index ETFs 0.16, according to Google. So we are very likely to see fee compression with any of these ETFs to come online. This isn't even including all the futures ETFs, obviously, that are also an option. But I think in order for spot to do well, we need to give people an incentive to actually buy spot. Right now, there's an incentive to buy the non-spot products. Yes, fees are insane, but kind of is what it is at the moment. So the next case scenarios for me, worst case is the SEC says, okay, you're right, appeals court. There isn't much difference between spot and futures. So we're just going to revoke all the futures because there's clearly market manipulation. Kind of a weaker worst case would be them appealing the ruling. According to what I've heard at Bloomberg, they said that that's unlikely. But they can take this to the Supreme Court, or they can take this to the full appeals court. I don't really know how that works, but this was only a 3-judge ruling versus another ruling that they could seek within the appeals court. I think the base case is the SEC just continues to delay everything, as they have. There's a bunch of deadlines coming this week. Happy to be wrong here, but I can't imagine the SEC is just going to turn around and say, okay, yeah, you're right. Here, have fun. Here you go. So that's obviously the best case. The best case is we get all our ETFs approved, fees come way down, we live happily ever after, and we're ready for halving, right? I don't think that's going to happen. I'll be happy if it does, but I just don't think that's going to happen. But that's always an option, right? Grayscale winning the case was always an option. The SEC approving all these ETFs is always an option. Gary becoming Secretary of Treasury and Yellen stepping down, retiring is always an option, right? These things are always an option. Doesn't mean it is going to happen or I'm betting on it, but these are our options. Another option is that Grayscale can say, you know what, we're going to work to find a way that we can stake ETH. I think that's their next positive headline, because at the end of the day, it requires very little lift on their end to just say that they're going to do it or they're looking into it. Now, they might have already said that elsewhere, but if you're looking for something that can influence the discount on the ETH side of things, it would certainly be that. The Canadian ETF issuer 3IQ has said they're going to work with Coinbase to figure this out. This was a few months ago at this point. And if you look at Grayscale revenue, this is the block now. If you look at their revenue, it is still considerable, and they have no reason to want to get rid of this, obviously. And you can see the flows out of GBTC, just continuous nonstop. Now, in the grand scheme of things, daily volume-wise, it's a drop in the bucket. Who cares? But you're just bleeding value as a holder continuously. Certainly a problem for the buy and hold crowd. We did have the benefit today, though, of getting all these positive headlines for GBTC, which, price goes up on the news, we get the headlines, price goes up more. People say, oh, there's a change in the regulatory headwinds finally, right? So it's certainly helped. And we're going to have more and more, legalese, discussions and rulings and blah, blah, blah. That's definitely going to help. Just getting attention, it just helps us, period, at this point in time, because just nobody's here. Nobody cares, right? As Eric Balchunas is saying, even on ABC, they were covering this news. My guess is a lot of these media folks are younger now and are very much aware of the Bitcoin stuff, because Bitcoin is just sort of pervasive generally amongst the very online crowd. But as Sonali at Bloomberg says, this is not an automatic GBTC conversion, as I've seen some people discuss. This is going to take some time. There's a 45-day period from here on out where the SEC can decide to appeal this. So this is the beginning, but very, very good news so far. And like I already said, we knew this was coming to some degree in March when the appeals court was very much on Grayscale's side. Now, on the flip side, of course, Genesis, DCG, dealing with paying back the Gemini earned people, paying back the Genesis creditors. So this was very much a welcomed ruling for the business of Grayscale and actually paying these people off, because how it stands now, I doubt Gemini is going to just approve what DCG is trying to give them here, but we'll see what happens with Tyler and Cameron and what they say about it. But it's not 100% one-to-one recovery. It is potentially 70 to 90%. And, you've got the Redeem GBTC campaign. You've got Alameda Research going after Grayscale for charging fees. And, this goes on and on and on. So it's not over for Grayscale. But very good news for BTC. Very good news for people who couldn't give a flying flip about GBTC. Just great news for the industry as a whole. Better access to these products eventually from an institutional perspective. So we're still below the cloud on the daily. So not too much to celebrate there, but obviously going up 6% is better than down at this point, considering, again, there's just not much attention or interest in Bitcoin. You may be able to argue now that we're back into some sort of channel here, and maybe we continue bouncing around for a while. I just don't see generally an immediate trade in the moment. I don't think this is a high that should be faded necessarily. It just continues to range within the multi-month price levels. In the pitchfork, we're back to the midline, still slightly below the midline. So look, these are all good things in the long term, and we're back in the weekly cloud, which is kind of bizarre. We are well above the previous wick from last week on the top. So all in all, this looks very good from a multi-week perspective. Is this enough to trigger an edge-to-edge trade long term? I guess it's fine. You could still say, you know what, I'm going to put my stop loss at 27 or some lower low and just forget about it, right? Just close the laptop, throw it in the river, do whatever you need to do, sit on your hands and say, look, my stop loss is at 25. We finally got a morsel of good news that's going to ignite a fire for a series of positive headlines. 42 would be the top side of that. We're sort of back above a bunch of moving averages. The 200 week, probably the most important, back above the 200 day, still below the 20 day and 50 day. But what I'd really like to see is an actual 5,200 bear cross here with price essentially right at it, flat. And then we just zero out all momentum. And then the 5,200 cross faders can cry when, we get a cross recross or something. But from a technical perspective, when you see this moving average congestion, it certainly represents just broad momentum resetting, but it also can act as an inflection point for the next move higher in this case, because we're signaling we're very likely to cross bearish here. And if that doesn't happen, that usually means we move higher. Just look at any, historical cross or crisscross on these high time frame moving averages. And lastly, I'll just mention ETH because, as a reminder, dreams can come true. And ETH has been in this ascending triangle. And if there was ever a day that ETH needed good news on the spot price, it was today, because it was on the verge, along with everything else, of breaking down. And the top panel here is BTC in 2015, when we had this sort of fake out breakdown. That was also a massive Bollinger Band fake out breakdown, whatever you want to call that. Earlier this week, I said there wasn't anything fundamental at the time that would make me believe that we'd actually get this move up on ETH. But hey, maybe this is it. Still very low volume, but if we can start to get the ball rolling finally in a positive direction for regulations, rates as well. Again, this is like the silent thing today. Yes, GBTC won the suit, but job market loosening, the signal that rates may be at an appropriate level. Maybe we won't get this massive hike that everyone's expecting anytime super soon. Risk can take a little breather here, and maybe things like Bitcoin and ETH can start to do well again. So that's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.